I use my bully pulpit and my communications channels to actually talk about sometimes uncomfortable issues, real issues in our industry. A lot of association execs use their voice to be propaganda for the work of the organization, whether it's come to the conference or join or what have you, and that's all necessary. But I had a mentor once tell me that association executive CEOs need to talk dirty to their members. And that made me laugh. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, what I mean is you're getting in the mud, that you're showing them that you're willing to get your hands dirty on the issues most important to them, and you're talking about it. So I do that. I can be a bit of a lightning rod sometimes because most sectors and industries have controversial issues, but I use my position to talk about those on social media, in my speeches, in my columns. And I think we get a lot of respect because we do that. We're not afraid to talk about those conversations.
This is Associations Thrive, the podcast celebrating successful associations and their leaders. I'm your host, Joanna Pineda, CEO and Chief Troublemaker at Matrix Group International. Listen in as top association executives tell all, revealing the creative and innovative ways they're increasing membership, generating revenue, nurturing engagement, and reimagining their organizations. By the way, if you've launched a new initiative, created new member services, or updated your governance structure and are seeing great results, I want to hear your story, and so do my listeners. I'd love to have you as a guest. Go to podcast.matrixgroup.net and apply to be on Associations Thrive. Now let's dive into this week's show. Today, I'm speaking with Jay Caron, CEO of the National Golf Course Owners Association, or NGCOA. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joanna. Real pleased to be with you.
Well, tell us about NGCOA.
Sure. Well, golf is a wonderful sport, and a lot of Americans know all about us. In fact, 25 million or so play it. But few realize that there is a trade association behind it, and that's who we are. So NGCOA was founded in the 1970s, and we live and work for golf course owners and operators of all kinds, from municipal golf courses to private clubs to publicly accessible, privately owned courses, and everything in between. Pretty quintessential trade association. Happy to talk about what we do.
Wow. So Jay, Americans might be familiar with the big golf tournaments that are put on by associations like the PGA, USGA, or LPGA. So where are you in this ecosystem of golf associations?
I affectionately call my friends in that sector of our sport and industry Golf Hollywood, because it's all on television and it's all on screens and it's all about big media contracts and playing the game and Tiger Woods and Lexi Thompson and all these wonderful people out there. And in our universe, we represent the 15,000 golf courses that open their doors every morning to players and to people wanting to play the game of golf. We are under one roof, many businesses, a golf course owner operators in the hospitality business. They're in the farming business. Their crop happens to be turf grass. They have to grow really high quality turf grass and maintain their fields of play to certain standards. We're in the restaurant business as well, whether it's on the golf course or fine dining or casual dining at the facility. So it's a pretty complex little business. And just like every business in America, they need associations to help them on many, many issues. And that's what we do. And so we primarily educate golf course owners and operators on how to be successful. We bring them together in networking opportunities, and we are a lead advocate for them as well. Government affairs work and some other market influences that we address. And we've been doing this successfully again for about 50 years. And we've been on the rise significantly the past 8 or 9 years as well.
Now, are your members the golf course companies, or are they the people who manage the golf courses?
We're a trade association, so it's really the course is the member, I guess. We're kind of a hybrid, but we obviously serve the people that run them. So it can get confusing in the association world there, but really it's the golf course and the company that is technically the member.
Within these companies, it's the general managers who tend to be active in the association?
If it's private clubs, yes. because the owners of the private clubs oftentimes are the members themselves. 300 members might own a club or what have you. And the general manager is really the lead executive. So in that case, a general manager would likely be our member of record or the primary contact. In municipal golf course, the same thing. They're owned and operated by towns and cities and counties. Who owns it? Well, the town or the city does. The citizens do. But whoever's the director of golf or maybe the head of parks and recreation might be the actual point of contact for us. But the lion's share of our, I guess, the bread and butter of our association and why we were founded in the 1970s was really for the privately owned public golf course. We call them daily fee courses. The advent of the daily fee course in the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, thousands of these courses were built around America. And it was as if you and I, Joanna, owned a golf course together. We're the owners of record. One of us would be the primary contact, and we open our golf course to the public. But our board members are mostly the men and women who own and operate the golf course themselves, or they might be the CEO of what we call a multi-course operator, someone who owns and operates 100 golf courses. The CEO of that company might be the member of record as well.
So you've got different types of golf courses that are members. So does the setting matter? I mean, you just mentioned that a town might own a golf course, but I'm familiar with private clubs. So there are different types of golf courses?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, the game is the same, except the difficulty might vary from course to course for sure, but the business behind it is very different. For example, if it's a municipal golf course, then the DNA of the business is a bit different. It's about welcoming all. In fact, if it's part of the Parks and Recreation division, they're going to do whatever they can to make sure it's accessible to all in many, many ways, economically accessible and programs and services for the community. If it's a private club of the highest nature, it might be the opposite of that. We only exist for the 100 people who are members of this club and what they want. And there are some clubs, Joanna, that are so private and so exclusive that you might have one member playing that day and nobody else.
Wow.
And then everything in between. So the game is the same, but the business definitely varies for sure. And they can run from $250,000 income operations up to $25-30 million businesses at that local level. So it's quite complex, more complex than a lot of people might realize.
Well, we're going to talk about the things that you are doing to thrive, and thriving you are. But before we do that, let's talk about your journey. So how do you get to become CEO of NGCOA? How did this happen?
It's an interesting thing. So in 1997, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina to get my master's in history. My goal at that moment was to be a social studies teacher, a high school social studies teacher. I had, dreamy eyes of impacting America's youth. And I thought I was going to teach social studies. So I loved history and civics and everything. I would coach cross country in the fall, golf in the spring. That was kind of what I had my sights on. So I'm getting my master's in history in August of 97. And I realized that I don't have any money. I need a part-time job. So I happened to have a friend from college whose mother worked at this place I'd never heard of called the National Golf Course Owners Association.
Oh.
Little office of about 10 people at the time. And she needed an assistant. She was the conference planner. And she did many things. Actually, when you have a staff of 10 or so, you wear many hats. And so her primary job was to be the director of our annual meeting. She needed an assistant. So I said, sure, I'll do that. So 2 weeks into my part-time job as her assistant, they said, can you do this full-time and work for us? I was like, I think I can. This is pretty cool. First of all, I love golf. That's just a coincidence that I loved golf. And I've been playing since I was 10 years old. But I really dug the association thing that I was really discovering here. I thought, this is pretty darn cool. I had been in my student career, presidents of clubs, president of student government body, all of these things that were kind of mini associations a little bit. In my first job out of college, I worked for my fraternity and I worked for the national office. So my very first gig was in the bowels of a national headquarters, right?
Association, right.
Yeah, so I thought that's pretty cool, but that was a fraternal organization. So that was different. But then I happenstance fell into this job and this is pretty cool. So I took the job full time and I stayed for 10 years through 2007. And during that time, I took association management very seriously. I became a student of it. I went to everything I could at ASAE. I started going to conferences. I started just taking that profession seriously and fell in love with it. So by time 2007 came around, I was ready to leave NGCOA and I wanted to run an association. So I left and moved my family up to the Philadelphia area and became the CEO of the Trade Association for the Bed and Breakfast Industry. And it was a small organization at the time. I think it was 6 staff. And boy, did I have fun in that organization. I really had an amazing time with those people and the members and everybody. And then golf came calling again in 2015 when the CEO of NGCOA, who had been there for 25 years, it was my former boss, was leaving. And so they came calling and asked if I wanted to apply, and I did. And so I went back to NGCOA in 2015 as the CEO of the organization. So I've been there now for, in a few weeks, it'll be 9 years I've been back. That's my little journey on how I came back. But really, I had to leave to learn so much outside of the golf space and to cut my teeth on running an association in order to even qualify or think about coming back to where I was. And so the best thing I could have done was leave before coming back.
So I got a zillion questions, but the first question is, what happened to the master's in history?
Well, I finished it. I finished it right when I was getting married. In fact, I married the young woman who told me about this job that her mother had at NGCOA. So she was just a friend of mine at the time, not a love interest. But after I started working at NGCOA, she became a love interest. And so I got a family and a career out of this whole thing. But I did finish and I got my master's degree. And I will say another story for another day. I did quit NGCOA for basically 1 week. And I did teach at a public high school here in Charleston. It's kind of a bad story, good and bad story, but I quickly went back to NGCOA. So I didn't teach long enough to qualify for retirement when you only teach for 1 day. Honestly, Joanna, I use the bully pulpit that I have and the voice that I have to teach. I really have used my position, whether it was at the Bed and Breakfast Association or in golf, to try and teach our members the things they need to be thinking about to be successful. And so I kind of get to scratch the itch with adult learners more so than children.
Well, speaking of bully pulpit, you're vice chair of the ASE board of directors, and you're going to be chair next year. What's that like? And what's on the agenda?
First of all, it's really gratifying to serve in that way because right now, in this moment in time in ASAE's history, we're in the middle of a lot of change management with Michelle Mason having come on board a few years ago. And it's an exciting time to be on a board. I think the most exciting time to be on a board is when a lot is happening, a lot of change is happening. Otherwise, then it's all about just making the trains run on time. And that's not fun.
Right.
So we've been turning ASAE kind of around. It's been a ship that was struggling financially. And we, had been losing members. And with the new leadership and Michelle's discipline and creativity, we're turning the ship around. Membership is on the rise like it hasn't been in a long time. The financials are getting in great shape. So to be able to participate that kind of in the laboratory, in the room, so satisfying. It's like all the cooks that want to be in the kitchen. We get to be in the kitchen as association exec in our association. So it's really fun. And I always say, Joanna, whoever's at that table at ASA or in the room, I never feel like the smartest person in the room. I always feel like there's such high caliber quality people coming in to really support the profession. It's just so fun to be in a room with creative, impactful, really, really smart people. And I just enjoy the process.
Well, 100%. I just was at ASE annual and it was terrific.
Yeah.
It's like the energy and the creativity are back.
I agree.
It was really, really fun. Cleveland did a beautiful job and ASE did a beautiful job.
They did. They should be proud of the work, and they continue to push the envelope and try new creative things. I think that's really what Michelle's doing here is let's try some creative, impactful, relevant things. And I think it's resonating.
Well, let's turn to NGCOA. Your organization is innovating and thriving, and you say that government affairs is really important to NGCOA. What kind of issues do golf courses and golf course owners have? And what's your role in all this?
As I mentioned earlier, there are multiple businesses under the same roof or even outside, because we're outside as well. An average golf course has 150 acres of land that they're trying to maintain. So we as an industry, and NGCOA has been part of this for about only 15 to 20 years have we taken advocacy seriously as an industry. And it all started when Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, I think it was. And the federal government passed some legislation, some disaster relief legislation to help all the businesses impacted by the floods and hurricanes. At the time, the bill that they passed referred to an old piece of language in some tax code from the 1970s where there was a list of businesses like massage parlors, tanning salons, casinos, liquor stores, and golf courses were on this list we affectionately call the sin list. Well, the sin list was referred to in that legislation after Katrina that these businesses don't qualify for the said disaster relief.
Oh.
So once we saw that happen and felt that happen, that our golf courses couldn't qualify for the same flood relief that the restaurant down the street could, we had to activate. We had to put in motion. Well, hang on a second. That obviously means they don't see us as a legitimate, positive industry in America. And we are. And here's why. And so for years, we've been going to Capitol Hill on what we call National Golf Day and talking about the goodness of golf, what we add to the economy, how we are good stewards of land and water. Otherwise, why would we kill our own golden goose, which is our land and water, to make golf work, right? And to make them understand that we are a business, not just a recreation. We're not just a game. We have businesses behind all of this. And it's been working. And so we deal with environmental issues and land issues. For example, conservation easements. A lot of wonderful land around America is given into conservation easement status to preserve it as green space forever. There have been times in Congress where someone in Congress wants to make golf courses ineligible for conservation easements. Yes, there are some tax credits for doing so, but what better way to preserve this land as open space forever and avoid development than being able to become a conservation easement? So we've had to kind of defend golf and make sure we protect our conservation easement status. This whole sin list I talked about, we have a bill in Congress right now, HR 3124, to carve golf out of this tax code. And we've got bipartisan support because now, I mean, we're going to talk about the pandemic probably, but golf coming through the pandemic, we became a bright star out there as far as an activity on what Americans could do. All of a sudden, our elected officials kind of woke up and said, wow, golf is actually pretty good here. It's good for Americans, for health, and all of these things. And so the narrative started changing. Now we've got this bill in Congress where we have Republicans and Democrats supporting our effort to get golf taken off of this, ancient tax code so that we can enjoy disaster relief when it happens, or economic stimulus legislation has passed where golf, among others, have been carved out as not eligible for this. So that taxation issues. Another one is ASAE. They have a bill in Congress that they're pushing for that would allow for Americans to use what they used to call their college savings accounts. We're trying to change the nomenclature to career savings accounts.
Yes.
To use the 529 plans on certifications.
Yes.
Right? Well, golf, we have many professions within our ecosystem that require and lean on certifications. PGA professionals, golf course superintendents, they learn how to be scientists in taking care of the land and water. So we're advocating for this same passage of this bill so that people can come into the golf industry and use their college savings. So lots of issues, Joanna, but environment, taxation, land, employment issues, what have you, even at the local level, tax assessments, how are golf courses assessed versus other kinds of land we get involved in? Lawsuits. We've just dealt with 2 or 3 different errant golf ball lawsuits where a golfer or homeowner, or let's say a house is getting pelted with golf balls and they sue the golf course. Who's liable here? Right? Or when someone gets hurt on a golf course because of an errant golf ball, is the golf course liable? Or is there an assumption of risk when you get on a golf course and do these things? We get involved in these issues on the government affairs side. And there are other issues that don't involve the government that we have to lean in on also from time to time. But it's become probably the most important work that we do as an association. And it probably resonates the most with our sector for sure when they look at NGCOA and what is the most valuable work that we are doing.
Jay, that sounds like a lot of issues.
Yeah.
How do you decide which issues to get involved with? I think that's a question that a lot of trade associations grapple with.
If we have trouble deciding, we will run it through our board of directors. What do you think of this issue? We have an advocacy committee as well, made up of a cross-section of our members that we will go to from time to time. What do you think about this? But oftentimes, we're the professional staff that was hired to figure these things out. And so we use our own filters. We kind of will, as a staff, analyze, should we lean in on this? Is this going to be costly? If so, how do we get the funds to make this happen? I'd say the staff is empowered to really make the decisions and prioritize what we think we need to work on, honestly.
So it sounds like you've got lots of conversations happening all the time with your board. to provide you with guidance about what to pursue. But during the prep, you said something really interesting to me, which was you said, look, part of our success is that we have a bright line between governance and management. So tell us about that a little bit. And I'll tell you, governance keeps coming up in this podcast. So I want to dive into that a little bit.
It's something that I really studied when I was running an organization called Select Registry. We used the Carver method of governance at that time, which was incredibly prescriptive. Board, you can do this and you cannot do these things. And staff, you can do these things and not do these things. Very prescriptive. Some might say a little bit too rigorous in many ways, but it certainly trained my mind to think about what is the right and best role of a board and what is the right and best role of staff. And I've been part of organizations, Joanna. I mentioned that fraternity that I was part of. It was a very much a board driven organization, so much so that the staff was just there as a rubber stamp, do what we say. And I saw the negative effects of that. I just thought, oh my gosh, the pendulum is so far this way. And I've seen it the other way as well, where the board is not involved and the staff does everything. And there are liabilities there. I feel like at NGCOA, we got the pendulum really right where it needs to be in the middle. And that is where the board, what we do is we spend our time as a board of directors when we meet, not going through reports, not necessarily talking about and discussing the work of the staff, but really inspiring us. What's on your minds, board? What are the issues you're facing? Give us feedback maybe on how we're doing and what we're working on. Foresight, what's coming down the road? My friend Jeff DeCania in our space likes to talk, and he's been talking about and preaching for years about foresight, the duty of foresight. We use our board of directors to talk about what's coming. What are you feeling? What tremors are you feeling out there? And I got to tell you, there's nothing quite like a trade association of owners and operators. I feel like they feel the tremors before anybody else does when things are coming. When COVID was hitting, I'll give you an example here. March of 2020, COVID was on the news. We saw this medical thing that was happening. And I get a call on a Friday night from one of my board members, Jay, this COVID thing, man, this is serious. We need to meet fast. 20 minutes later, another board member, these are owners of the business. Jay, we have to meet. This is going to be devastating. And because what they're feeling, Joanna, is they're feeling, one, my business is at risk here. I have employees I'm worried about here.
Right.
If things shut down, what's going to happen? The owner of a business feels that more acutely oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes before an employee does, right? Because the employee may think, if we get shut down, there's probably going to be unemployment out here, or there's going to be something. There's no safety net for a business owner.
Right.
Not until some COVID measures took place, there was a safety net there with PPP funding and all that kind of stuff. And that's what they do at the board level, Joanna, is that they'll share with us, Jay, we kind of feel this issue coming. The supply and demand curve feels like it's changing. We need to do something about getting more players into the game of golf. Back in the late 90s, it was the owner-operator of golf courses that were saying, Jay, we are worried about the supply and demand curve. We see golf courses coming out of the ground everywhere, but we don't see more golfers. We got to do something about this. So we launched the first ever player development programs in the space back in the late 90s to try to get ahead of that, to get more people playing golf because we were afraid. So the board really is our eyes and ears oftentimes as to what's happening. Now they say, Jay, what can you do about it? How can we use the tools of the association to activate against these things? And they don't get involved in the management of the issues. And, oh, did we serve chicken or dinner during lunch, at the conference meeting? No. We have a great understanding of each other's roles. And it's been very healthy in how we run the organization.
Well, I want to dive into something you just said, player development. Golf, correct me if I'm wrong, has a little bit of a reputation for being a little bit hoity-toity. Maybe perhaps it was on the sin list because it's seen as the hobby for the rich. Is that true?
First of all, great observation as to why we would have been on the sin list, because a lot of people would say, well, that doesn't make sense to have golf. Golf is not a liquor store. But in the 1970s, you got to look back a little bit. In the 1970s, golf was dominated still by private clubs. In our world, all right, the advent of the public golf course, the privately owned public golf course really hadn't taken effect yet. And so you're absolutely right. We were saying, well, we don't need to subsidize any issues or disaster relief with the playground of the rich and the elite, what have you. So you're right. And there's a real history there of sexism and racism, and just like you can probably find in any sector.
Absolutely.
Every sector of America has this history. In the golf space, it probably lingered longer than a lot of other places because of the private clubs. and their desire to say we should be able to associate with whoever we want. If we choose to be all male, that's our American freedom to choose to be an all male club if we want to, right? And so it lingered longer in that way. And that's probably one of the reasons why we had trouble in Capitol Hill for the first 5 to 10 years was this, well, I don't need to meet with golf. You're just a game for the rich, the elite. So I'd say there was truth to that for many years. Not wholly true because we've had municipal golf courses around for over 100 years. It's just, it didn't get the attention because what you see on television, in the Arnold Palmer or the advent of Arnie's Army and television, you saw
Right.
golf on television. The best private clubs in the world were hosting the majors. And so that got all the attention. But what I like to say these days, Joanna, is that we're a lot like dining out. If someone was to ask you, what is it like to eat in a restaurant in America? You'd say, well, it depends. What are we talking about? Are we talking about the greasy spoon down the street? Are we talking about the white glove service that it's impossible to get a reservation unless you know the owner or whatever? And everything in between. Golf is the same way. We've evolved over now in America 150 years as an industry to where we have private clubs, we have municipal golf courses, and we have daily fees golf courses that dominate the space now. The public golf course that is privately owned by like you or me. So I'd say when you look at who plays golf, we don't look like America yet, but we're not far behind. There are pockets of the games or prisms on the game that certainly have a lot of work to do. When you look at the professional elite game on television and what have you, not a lot of minorities, not a lot of people of color that have risen to that level. So you got to look at, well, what are the systemic issues that are preventing people of color from getting into those spaces? And the industry is facing those and working on those for sure. As a collective, not just any association, all associations are really addressing this because our mantra is we want golf to look like America. Whether it's the players that come play the golf courses, whether it's the people on television, our workforce that we want. One of the biggest areas that we've been trying to tackle here and there, it's a tough one, is the boards and C-suites around golf. It's 97% male and white, 97%. How do you change the leadership table, the shoes under the table, so to speak, right? How do you change the complexion and the gender mix and all of these things when a lot of people think it's a zero-sum game? You know, the only way to get someone of color or a woman at a board table is if someone leads. And I don't think that's necessarily how it has to be. So NGCOA, as an example, a couple of years ago, put on a conference called Lead Golf Together. And it was all about how do we start the process of matching up the boards and C-suites with the talent that is in our industry, the people that are not male and white, if you will. And so we've started that process and the conversation. And that's the toughest nut to crack, honestly, is that leadership circle and how to get more diversity there. So we're very well aware of this. And I talk about it, Joanna, in two ways. I say, either look at it dispassionately or passionately. The dispassionate fact is if you're open for business in America and the census tells you the changing complexion of America, you better change with it.
Yeah.
If you don't change with it and your primary customer is male and white, which is a shrinking share of the American populace, well, then your market's shrinking. And as a business, that's usually not a good thing when your market is shrinking, right? So that's the dispassionate look at just being as egalitarian as you can and open to everybody and inviting everybody, because there's a difference between being open to everybody and actually inviting everybody, but we can go down that path another time. The other thing is passionate looking to say, you know what? We need to right a wrong here. We have been elitist. We have been wrong in our past. You know, some of the bylaws of the best associations in golf, not until the 1960s, would allow women or people of color to even be members of those associations. And so we've come a long way. In fact, Native America and some others are leading the effort on diversifying our entire ecosystem. So there's a lot of work being done, but man, it's not going to be overnight.
Yeah. Jay, what other things are you doing to thrive besides the government affairs and this bright line between governance and management?
Yeah, I see nothing innovative here, Joanna, but I think there are a few things we're doing well that have allowed us to succeed. I don't call them innovative, but I think if more association executives did these things, maybe they would see new levels of success as well. One is I use my bully pulpit and my communications channels to actually talk about sometimes uncomfortable issues, real issues in our industry. A lot of association execs use their voice to be propaganda for the work of the organization, whether it's come to the conference or join or what have you. And that's all necessary. But I had a mentor once tell me that association executives, CEOs need to talk dirty to their members. And that
Oh.
made me laugh. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, what I mean is you're getting in the mud, that you're showing them that you're willing to get your hands dirty on the issues most important to them. And you're talking about it. So I do that. Can be a bit of a lightning rod sometimes because most sectors and industries have controversial issues, but I use my position to talk about those on social media, in my speeches and my columns. And I think we get a lot of respect because we do that. We're not afraid to talk about those conversations. I'd encourage more CEOs out there or any role to be a little bit more intentional about having those conversations about impactful, sometimes uncomfortable topics. Two is we are highly collaborative as an association. We work with all of our other associations in golf. We seek partnerships with major exhibition companies and all kinds of creative partnerships. We run a relatively small association, Joanna. We're about $4 million. I mean, it's larger than some, but smaller than most. $4 million association. So we're lauded for out punching our weight, which is kind of a dubious compliment because it's like, man, you do so much more than we figured you could at your budget, which is a compliment, but it's also a reminder that we don't have as much resources as others. In order to do that, outpunch your weight, I think comes through partnerships, through collaboration with others that have resources, that might have the channels and the audiences you're trying to reach. So highly collaborative partnerships has been a key to our success. And I'd say also, this may be controversial for those that like to survey their members and build their book of work on what their members tell them they want. We don't survey our members a lot and say, what do you want us to do? We think it's our job to stay one step ahead of them. As a staff, and in me as a leader, I'm reading about what's happening in society and the world and connecting the dots from my profession and my members and their businesses and saying, man, I see this coming around the corner. I think we need to address this. Because it's kind of like Henry Ford that was asked, if you could build something, what would it be? Like, we need a faster horse. If I ask my customers what they needed, they say a faster horse. It's like, well, we don't always ask our members because they don't know what they know what their issues are, but they don't know what they want.
Absolutely.
So I think more association executives, and what we try to do is stay a step ahead of them and deliver to them what they didn't know was coming and what they needed, but it hits the nerve that we know it's going to hit. We're constantly doing that as association professionals at the headquarters office, trying to figure out what's going to resonate most with our owners and operators.
Well, Jay, I'll tell you, I have found in my experience that the successful trade associations help their members navigate the future. If they were wholly reactionary, I think they'd be behind the eight ball. But if they are always looking ahead, then members will look to them as the place to go to help them navigate the future.
And also, that's what they're paying dues for.
That's true.
They're running their business. They're thinking, as business owners, they're like, I'm paying you as an employee to do this. I'm paying my trade association to do this. And what is this? It is to look around the corner, be the one ahead of me, telling me what's coming and delivering me value based on that. I'm with you on that one. That's probably the most important role we could play.
Yeah. Well, Jay, let's close with a question that I have for you. What's the statistic? Something like 8% of the US population plays golf. That's not a very big group. So it's 2024. Why should Joanna Pineda play golf?
Oh, what a softball question.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll tell you. Okay, so 8% of Americans play golf on golf courses, the grass outside golf courses. I will say that an additional almost 8% play on what's called off-course places, Topgolf, simulators.
Yes. I've played at those places.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm not going to go into that too much today, but that is catching fire. And that's kind of now under the golf industry in many ways. But I would say this. I love your segments that you've been putting out on social media about sitting next to someone on an airplane and talking to them and getting to know them.
The most interesting person on the plane, I call it.
Yes, I love it. It's great. And what I often say about golf is like, look, when strangers come together on a golf course, by the end of those 4 hours, by the way, when do strangers or even friends spend 4 hours together? Anytime. You're 2 to 4 hours, whether it's 9 holes or 18 holes. By the end of that experience, the strangers have become friends. And what is it about golf? Well, here's what it's about. It's about the two of you or the four of you facing humility together. I mean, honestly, that's what it's about. It's about, can I hit this little white ball with this club and advance it and have fun and get into that hole in as few strokes as possible? And I'm doing this with other people. I don't care if they're Republican, Democrat, old, young, black, white, whatever it is. We're sharing this communal experience together. It's fun as hell. And we're outside enjoying nature and we're doing this together. And I say humility because unless you are an amazing golfer, which not many people are, you're all facing the prospect of topping that ball, mishitting it, doing whatever, or you got a 3-foot putt. Can you make that putt? Everybody's facing this together. And I'll tell you, Joanna, when I've played golf with captains of industries, US senators, all that, in those moments, the playing field is level. We are getting to know each other as human beings. It's a space where we can talk business, when we can talk pleasure, tell me about your family, all of these things happening in this magical space of 150 acres of green grass. I mean, it's called the greatest game ever for a reason. So I think if you set aside the preconceived notion of elitism, if you really just look at this is something that I can do together with other people and have fun, and all of a sudden it unlocks so much ability to connect with other people. So that's why you should play the game of golf.
Well, Jay, you're inspiring me to take it up. I've taken a couple of lessons, and I've certainly spent time at the driving range and the Topgolfs of the world. So I'll have to have you back, and you can ask me about my golf journey.
Yes.
Jay, thank you so much. This was such a fun, informative, and terrific interview. Thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Anytime, Joanna.
Thanks for listening to Associations Thrive. We're so glad to have you here. You know, my personal mission and the mission of my company, Matrix Group International, is to help associations and nonprofits increase membership, generate revenue, and thrive in the digital space. I want to hear stories of how your organization is thriving in today's challenging landscape. Please apply to be on my show by going to podcast.matrixgroup.net. By the way, do you need help with a digital initiative? Maybe it's a website redesign, a new membership database, or a hybrid meeting that you're planning. I'd love to connect with you. Please visit the Matrix Group website at matrixgroup.net. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of Associations Thrive. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating, post a comment, and share it with your colleagues and friends. Bye!